Welcome back to the Resolution Room. Whether you're navigating conflict in your relationships, your work, or within yourself, you're in the right place. Let's step into the room. Okay, can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Hello, everybody. I am Boo. My real name is Christian, but I have been Boo since it was foisted upon me as a fighter pilot nearly 32 years ago. And it's an honor to be on the show today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Um, Let everyone know a little bit about your background, what you currently do for a living, and that'll help us frame a little bit of what we're going to dive into today.
Yeah, I mean, that's a long story. Today, I'm the CEO of an organization called Afterburner, a company that I purchased 3 years ago, which brings the cognitive models and the ways of working fighter pilots use into the corporate world, but it has just as much application in your private life as well. The backstory to that event happening is well, when I was a little boy, sort of the age of 5, I went to an air show and I saw these fighter jets for the first time. And I just remember sitting on the grass and looking at these huge machines and the noise just as they were taxiing past and the sun glinting off the canopy and the pilots inside there with their flight suits and patches, visors down, oxygen masks on. And I felt like it was kind of like Star Wars brought to life, and just walking around the air show and seeing all the pilots and the different airplanes. And then just that smell of jet fuel, I think, just smelling that as you walked around the airfield. And
I
just
got you. Huh?
from that point on, I mean, yeah, who doesn't love the smell of jet fuel, right? From that moment, I mean, I was just always going to be a fighter. I think it was that moment, I've got to reflect, and that was my first exposure. So I'm assuming that was the moment. But 17 years it took me. I was really bad academically, and I subsequently found out a few years ago that I have ADHD, about 99.6% on the self-assess scale, so pretty chronic. It explains everything about my academic and school life. And I repeated 12th grade. I didn't get the grades the first time around. I got slightly better grades, B plus, the second time around, which was enough to get into the Air Force. And I was fortunate to be selected as a pilot straight from high school. So for me, all I knew as a late teen was being an officer in the Air Force. Started pilot training when I was 20, and then spent 11 years in the Air Force, and a good portion of that as a fighter pilot, both in Australia and over in the United Kingdom as well. When I was 11, sorry, when I hit that 11 years, when I was 11, I was still dreaming.
I was going to say, yeah, this is going to be a really long backstory then.
Yeah. And then at 12 and then 13. And then I was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, which is an autoimmune condition. It's similar to Crohn's disease and those inflammatory type gut conditions. And unfortunately, I was discharged medically from the Air Force. So I had to start all over again. And that's when I started in business. So that's nearly 20 years ago. And I founded my very first business in Afghanistan. I just moved over there with my best friend Tom and established a company called CTG. And we started off in the kind of security game because that's all we knew as ex-military guys, but quickly morphed into humanitarian services and projects, and grew that company very rapidly. We exited it 4 years later, and then I kind of moved into property development, construction, hotels, then into publishing. And 10 years ago, an Australian fighter pilot was doing an afterburner event, and I hadn't really heard of it before. And he was telling me that it's sort of fighter pilots that help businesses. And I was like, well, that sounds kind of a little bit cheesy, getting up in a flight suit and telling people how to be better as a fighter pilot. But when I saw it, I had this kind of moment, this synapses, and it was like, wow, yeah, everything I did in business and everything that's been driving me successfully is because of the mentality and the mindset that I was conditioned into as a fighter pilot, but also that mindset is the byproduct of the system that we use to train and to operate. So as the universe, the universe has a plan. So I'm here for a reason. I was discharged medically for a reason. I came across my friend for a reason. he decided he wanted to go back to the Air Force. Exactly, been doing it for 10 years. And exactly the moment I met him, he was thinking of not doing it anymore. So he
Really?
sold me the business. And then I did this kind of afterburner stuff in Australia for 7 years. I was still running businesses
Mhm.
on the side. Oh, I was doing afterburner on the side, businesses as my full time job. And 3 years ago, I was having a conversation with the founder of Afterburner, and he sounded a little bit tired. I'm like, "Oh, you sound tired." And he goes, "Yeah, I've been doing this for 27 years. I've had enough." And I kind of jokingly said,
Mhm.
"Buy the company off you." Accepted the offer, and here I am. I now live in the United States. I'm nearly here 3 years now. I live in Park City, Utah, and living true to my life's purpose, helping people, I guess, think and act the way I've always done it to be
Mhm.
successful.
Mhm.
And I'm on a mission to build a movement of what I call flawless leaders. And flawless leaders are impactful leaders that kind of leave what is modern leadership, the overwhelm and burnout, kind of leave that behind and then
Oh,
move into a version of themselves where they're able to put a lot less effort into things, but actually achieve bigger impact as a result.
I love that. We're going to dive into that a little deeper momentarily. But thinking and just hearing your story, you've jumped around to, again, so many sectors, right? Military, humanitarian organizations, corporations, realty, all these things. What's one skill that you developed across all of these sectors that you think guides you through life in general?
And not being an expert, I think, like being stupid is how I call it. It's if you come into the room and you just come in thinking that you're the least intelligent, knowledgeable person, you'll always come in with an open mind and you'll always start with curiosity. That curiosity came from the Air Force, where it doesn't matter particularly in the world of fighter pilots, it doesn't matter how hard you work, how much you study. It's humanly impossible to be on top of it. Like there's something can always catch you out. So you always show up with this humility and this hunger for knowledge because everything you learn can save you, keep you alive, or in combat make you more effective. So you get the job done with the minimum amount of damage. That's kind of the name of the game.
I like that approach a lot. I think I'm similar, and I couldn't put my finger on it if I just had imposter syndrome, or if I am just a curious person who tries to be open minded.
Yeah, it's funny because we're in a world where kind of extroverted, confident people are stealing the narrative, but I think at times a lot of those people aren't experts. um, and there's a very shallow kind of perspective on how things work. I think the way humanity works together, the way we make decisions, where we are as a society now. There's a lot of incredibly deep elements to that. It's not just, hey, get off your phone, be kind, be empathetic. A little bit more nuanced than that. And I think once we understand that, yeah, because people always ask me, what are the one thing you need to do? Give me three things. And it's like, well, there's thousands of things
Formula.
that you
Right.
need to do. But I think what's really important is, if I was to say three things, I think intention is important because that gives you something to focus on. And I did it. My intention was to become a fighter pilot. Took me 17 years, but I did. Then my intention was to be financially independent through a business, and I was. And now my intention is to, you know, help 2 million leaders to not get fired by AI and transition into, you know, being less action orientated leaders, which is what most leadership models are, into more thoughtful leaders that embrace this idea of architecture and design that allows the machines to kind of go and do the heavy lifting. So yeah, it's a very complex world now, very fast. But I think being a fighter pilot and coming from that world, which is by default complex and fast, kind of sets you up for success with what's going on now.
Right. And I love the focus of this conversation being on sort of high stakes conversations and conflicts. And so just thinking about your time as a fighter pilot, what does decision making actually feel like at 50,000 feet in a combat environment versus like the work you do now?
Well, it feels a lot easier because we're trained to make decisions. I don't think anyone really ever gets trained to make decisions. We just kind of make decisions and hope for the best. Whereas a fighter pilot is trained to make a decision and be prepared for the consequence of the decision immediately. And and because we approach everything through the lens of seconds and minutes rather than days and weeks, what you learn is that life offers you an opportunity to make lots of micro decisions. And every time you make a micro decision, it's not very scary because you can just make another decision afterwards. So we build a framework of decision making that enables you to make lots and lots and lots and lots of small reversible decisions rather than infrequent big ones that are very emotional, that you're emotionally connected to. And what we understand is our reality happens very quickly. So as you go, you go out on, and plan a mission, like you've got a plan for it. But when you're flying, that's the reality of the mission, and it's can be very different from the plan. So you've got to be able to transition in that reality very quickly and still get to the target. And it's something that fighter pilots do very well. Like we kind of successfully achieve the missions 99.1% of the time. And those, I, I have a lot of challenges with people in the leadership space because when we come with those sort of statistics, people think we're full of bump, that this is ridiculous. Like, what are you guys talking about? But what it highlights to me is just how rarefied the fighter pilot community is because 99% is kind of like if every 1% costs a life or an airplane. So if we went and flew with the same sort of statistics as business, there'd be no airplanes or pilots left. It's the same in an airline. If you sat there and said, "Oh, what airlines have a 90% on time arrival rate and they have an accident one every 100,000 hours," you would just say, "Well, I hope so." So there's things you can take from fighter world, from aviation,
Yeah.
that's even beyond medicine. And I think where we're unique in aviation is it's a young industry. So every other industry in the world is kind of old. Medicine is old. Logistics is old. Manufacturing is old. And when you're old, you bring all the bad habits of 400 years ago. Whereas we
Right.
started fresh and like, hey, look at this new business. And then smokes, airplanes are crashing everywhere and everyone's dying. Like, whoa, this is not good. So we brought in systems where you could stop being in the news every week because you were killing yourself or someone else. So we built a mental model. It's all about mentality
Mhm.
that is the byproduct of the system. And there's no other systems on earth that do that, where mindset and the method are attached together. And with flawless leadership, that's why we created mindset, method, and moments, because we created the thinking part, the
Mhm.
doing part, and the timing when you have to show up as when you have to show up as the emotional version of yourself, the thoughtful version of yourself, and the action orientated version of yourself. And each of us have to transition through those moments on a daily basis.
Mm. And you mentioned, which I thought was really interesting, training decision making. I think about all the skills that you teach leaders in different contexts, especially from nonprofits, education, corporations. There's a lot of the same sort of skills we teach them. I never really thought about decision making being a skill you teach. How are people trained to respond under pressure versus reacting instinctively?
Yeah, well, the pressure is an interesting word because people always say, "Ah, how do you make decisions under pressure?" Well, pressure is a good thing. Like that's a good place to make decisions. You just have to make sure that it's pressure, not stress. That's two different things. And there's this idea of the peak performance stress curve. And when you look at this curve, on the one side is complacency, on the far other side is stress and anxiety, and right in the middle is peak performance. And it's that whole pressure is a privilege. And it's what athletes train to target. It's what fighter pilots. You want a level of arousal that actually fires that fires everything up, your brain, your body. So you're a little bit more kind of edgy. That is a little bit uncomfortable. The peak stress curve is sort of an uncomfortable place. So you make better decisions there because your brain's working better. You're far more focused and engaged with your environment. So pressure is good. Secondly, you want to create an environment where there's the minimum amount of pressure possible. Like the reason there's so much pressure in business is because all the decisions are made late, the work's done late, everything just happens at the last minute. So you're always pushing up against a deadline, which time is the pressure. So if you're good at managing time, which we're losing the skill to do, like this is, I was reading this emerging research that's demonstrating that the more digitally connected we are, the more we lose the concept of time. Like we start to lose the ability to understand how much I can achieve in an hour, in a day, in a week. We're just always on and always doing.
Yeah.
So what happens is, because you're busy all the time, all of a sudden the deadline creeps up on you, and now you're under pressure and you're making decisions and you're emotional, so your decisions aren't very good, and that's creating more pressure. So it just becomes a vicious circle if you don't break it. And that's in the fighter pilot world, we have a deliberate circuit breaker to what we call the decision making loop. When you learn how decisions work, you have to understand that decisions are a circle, and that every decision you make ultimately comes back to you in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's neutral, sometimes it's negative, but every decision has an impact. So what you have to an impact is an emotional byproduct of the decision. So what you have to do is you've got to break away from the emotion of a decision and start to reprogram your human autopilot, start to reprogram your biases, beliefs, and behaviors. So there's 7 steps to decision making. The first one is perception. So we make a decision based on how we perceive the world. And 95% of decisions are effectively based on a feeling, not reality. Then we process the information. So if, for example, you're an executive and you wake up and you feel bad, you'll typically look at all the data as if it's bad. If you come to work and you feel good, you will look at the same data, but look at it with a positive lens. So all of a sudden, you're starting to see how decision making is starting to diverge using the same information. The third step in decision making is projection. So we project into the future that doesn't even exist. And we make this mental risk assessment. And it's like, well, if I make this decision, and most of the time, the projection is how is this going to reflect on me? It's not really the effect of the decision. Then we make the decision. That's the fourth step. So the decision gets made. There's a whole bunch of action. That's the fifth step of decision making. Something happens. And then there's results, like something happens as a result of the action. And the final step of the decision making loop is the emotional impact, which is impact. So what fighter pilots do after that seventh step, we put in another step, and that step is reflection. Reflect on the decision and ask yourself, is what I perceived what actually happened? If not, why not? And what am I going to do differently tomorrow? Not what am I going to think differently, but what am I actually going to do? And what you find, and this is a gap in psychology, because psychology is so wedded in the mind, it's except for cognitive behavioral therapy, there's a bit of behavior and action in that. But what you need to do to have a growth mindset and to actually improve tomorrow is reflect on today. So when someone says, "Hey, what's the one thing you tell a leader?" Well, it's the one thing that comes out from that debrief, from that conversation. So whatever that is, it's in the context of where you're going, so that's important. It's measured against reality, so that's important. You've spent the time to reflect with an open heart and an open mind, and the action is 100% commitment to doing it the next day. So if you think of an action equals behavior equals habits. It's all the same thing, but you just got to pick a word, right?
Mhm.
So what happens is over time, if you start to operate like this after every decision, start reflecting on it, and you can do it in 5 seconds or you can do it in 5 hours. It just depends on
Mhm.
the size of the decision. So what happens is your perceptions get sharper. Your integrity around challenging your perceptions gets better, and you start to change your habits and your behavior. And then if we start to do that at a team level, the team starts to change their behavior and their habits. And then if the team starts changing their actions, behaviors, and habits, the organization changes its culture because The culture is the byproduct of the behaviors exhibited by the people inside it.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. I love the part you added on about reflection. It's so important. And I guess there's not a right or wrong way to reflect, of course, but how do you guide people through reflection? Because I feel like it's a slippery slope to do that with accountability versus not doing it with blame or excuse of why things happened the way they did. So, for someone who's already in their head and nobody wants to be wrong, how do you get someone to actually reflect meaningfully or
Well,
objectively?
there's three pillars to reflection. And this is, again, where I think people get it wrong. Reflection requires intention. So you can't reflect without knowing where you're going, right? Reflection for the sake of reflection just creates more anxiety, right?
Mhm.
The second part of reflection is reflection needs to drive action. So we're not looking for feedback, we're looking for to feed action forward. So you don't need to worry about blame because the problem with blame is someone else has to do something. When you're accountable and you own it, you can do something. So the intention is important, the action is important, and then the transparency is the third pillar, where you just have to be honest with yourself. And sometimes being honest with yourself is bringing someone else into the reflection. It's the ability for someone to pick up your blind spots. And I understand, like, don't get me wrong, meditation is powerful. It helps temper the amygdala and it helps develop the cerebellum. But at the same time, meditation is often a very personal thing. And the challenge with reflection is you don't see your biases, you don't see your blind spots. So when it comes to reflection, I encourage people to reflect with someone else, not someone else that isn't involved in what you're doing, but someone else that's in the fight with you. So
Mhm.
that could be something as simple as if you're, want to run a marathon, then go to a running club and debrief with someone else who's running with you, or debrief with a coach. I mean, this is where coaching is so powerful. Your
Mhm.
coach is your accountability buddy, right? Then often a friend is the worst person to be accountable to because they don't want to hurt your feelings, so they're just going to say yep and agree with you.
Right.
And in fighter pilot world, this person's called a wingman. Like we actually
Mm.
document this person and document their role, and their job is to allow you to reflect while they watch and then pick out the things that you didn't see. So reflection against your intention, transparency around your blind spots, invite someone in. And the point is not to beat yourself down, it's to give yourself something to try again tomorrow.
Mm.
And if you
Mm.
think about it, like every single day you reflect on something and you do two or three things differently the next day, clearly you are eventually going to get there. Whatever it is you want, you're going to get it. It's almost impossible. It's almost like a
Right.
bankable guarantee.
Earlier you mentioned, you talked about moments as decision points. Um, what makes a moment pivotal, and how do you like distinct that from just all the other things that are happening in a day?
Yeah, moments at the first moment, which is I call leading now, is the second by second moment. It's the moment where you've got to make the leap of faith. And most decisions are a leap of faith because who knows what's on the other side of a decision. The the
Mm.
world's a crazy place. The second layer, which is what I kind of call the decision architecture. So it's kind of the framework where you're saying to yourself, look, based on what we know now, we're going to make a decision and three or four things could happen. We're here. So when the point comes at a decision and it's one of those three or four things, we know what to do. And if it's not one of those things, well, at least we know everything else that we plan is not going to work either because it's not what we were expecting. And then the final layer, which is the people leadership layer, the human centric layer, that's about creating the safe environment for decisions where we accept that people are going to make decisions and often they're not going to be the right ones, but that's okay. And this is the environment where we're aligning the personal wins with other people. Like everyone needs to win at the human layer. So it's where we're asking, hey, what does good look like to you? You know, 3 years, where do you see yourself? I see myself with a house. Okay. And if you're a business owner, you're like, right, well, you're earning 100,000 a year at the moment. What sort of house do you want? I want this house. Okay. That's going to be 150. I can help you get to 150, but this is what you need to do for me. And all of a sudden people are like working for you to hit your numbers because they see the house at 3 years down trail. So what's really neat about our system is the debrief creates the growth mindset. So the debrief is the method that creates the growth mindset. And then we apply them at the moments where we get personal alignment uh, with the organization, and everything starts to sing. It starts to harmonize. And when we operate in harmony, that's how you get the less effort, more reward. It's no different to going and listening to a sixth grade concert where everyone's out of sync and it's kind of hurts your ear, and then going to a symphony where it soothes you. That harmony is an essential element in life for calm. But we don't really create intentional harmony between people. It rarely happens. I mean, I've worked with hundreds of companies, and I've never worked for a single company that has harmony. And harmony in terms of rhythm equals harmony in terms of people getting on together.
Um, what is the get it done mindset? And where did that
Get it done is really, if you see litter and it shouldn't be there, just pick it up. Like, just get the small things done. They're the things that just most people feel like it's not my problem. It's not my responsibility. I didn't put it there. So get it done is kind of like, hey, release yourself from ego. Don't release yourself from ego and just do the right thing. And then what happens is when you start doing the right thing, what do you think happens? When you start doing the right thing and you start doing good things in the world, how do you think you start feeling about yourself? You start feeling that you're a good person, right? When you make the decisions other people don't make, like I get up early in the morning, I don't drink, I do a whole bunch of things that at the end of the day make me feel different from everyone else, and I have self-worth as a result of that
Mhm.
because I just don't do what everyone else does, and I'm true to myself, and I do healthy things. And I do pick up litter when I'm walking up in the mountains here in Park City and there's a bottle, I'll pick it up, right? Because someone has to. So be that person. So get it done just means if you see something and your thought is someone needs to do something about that, you be the one. You get it done.
Mhm, mhm, I like that. And then we touched on this a little earlier, but tell me a little bit more about what is flawless execution and why does it work across industries?
So flawless is this idea where we have to accept we can't be perfect. And when we accept we can't be perfect, which means people make mistakes, things happen that we're not expecting, we free ourselves from trying to deliver the impossible. And when you try to deliver the impossible, it induces a lot of anxiety, right? It induces a lot of stress. And there was a study done a few years ago that identified that 86% of leaders suffer from undiagnosed perfectionism. And what that really means is that subconsciously, like there's this story going on behind our eyes where we're telling ourselves, you're not good enough and you're a loser because you're not there yet. You should have done this. You should be there. You should have achieved this. So, what happens as a result of that is it triggers more control. You try and do more things because your subconscious says if you can just control everything, you can get it done perfectly. The problem is no one can control everything. So, when you start to control everything, you become overwhelmed. And when you become overwhelmed, the narrative gets louder and it says, you're overwhelmed because you're not successful. You're not there yet. You need to do more. So then you get more controlling and you end up in what I call the perfection death spiral. So flawless is releasing yourself from perfectionism, releasing yourself from the perfect outcome, and then investing 100% in everything that you can control to start the journey towards where you want to be. So flawless is a powerful concept because it helps people get away from saying, it's too hard. The world's too complicated. Blame, blame, blame. Uh, But Flawless says, don't do that. Flawless says, yep, the world's difficult. Yep, there's plenty of reasons to not get things done. But being flawless means no matter what's happening, we ask ourselves, well, if something happened that I couldn't control, what did I do next? How did I deal with it? Rather than use it as an excuse to stop. So I love it. I love this idea of flawless, this almost perfect, but never can be. It's how I've lived my life.
Yeah.
You know, you you're constantly learning and making loads of mistakes, but and people sometimes think of you and they're like, hey, you should. Why don't you feel down about that? Like you should feel bad. I'm like, no, I'm not going to feel bad because it was just a mistake. It's not. So what? Yeah, I invested some money or I had some investors and we lost money, but that 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 happens.
Mhm,
But what are we going to do next? Right. Let's reset the investment. Let's raise a little bit more capital. Let's keep things going.
mhm.
And when you're like that, what happens is people tend to gravitate towards you because everyone knows stuff goes wrong. But if you're the one that says stuff goes wrong, but hey, let's keep going. Let's do this. Let's try something else. Let's keep going. Um, People feel that like hopeful that things can be better.
Yeah, I, think about this all the time, especially just being a new entrepreneur. Everything you said was just hitting home as you were talking, and one thing that's really difficult is, not to blame social media for everything, but you do see nothing but success stories, and everyone seems like they're 10 steps ahead of you at all times, and so I guess how do you balance the reality of what it takes to succeed and what you're seeing around you in the social world?
Yeah, this was really useful for me on pilot training. You would have other because it's highly competitive because they only take sort of the top 5% to go to fighter jets. Everyone wants to be a fighter pilot, or most people. During training, people are telling you, I had a great mission this week. And then you instantly feel like, oh, God, they're doing really well and I'm struggling. So part of the training program is they say, look, the people who are talking about being successful are usually the ones that are struggling the most. And I see that in social media. There are a few super successful influencers out there, don't get me wrong. And there are some very credible people on social media. But a lot of it is just BS, particularly about, I started a business and I made $1 billion in 2 weeks. And it's like, no, you didn't. You did not
At
do that.
23.
Yeah. You know, and there's all these stories about companies that, where was I the other day? I was in Poland, in Warsaw, and they had a building there that was full of, had like a aeroplane fuselage, private jet. It had like a Ferrari, a Bugatti. And basically, it was just a studio for people to come and film themselves looking like they owned cars and
Oh.
private jets.
Mhm, mhm,
And it just
mhm,
had all these different stations everywhere where you could shoot like you're in a luxury restaurant or a luxury hotel room. So
mm,
there's a lot of BS out there. And again, being flawless means don't worry about other people. Don't worry. Like you cannot control them. You cannot control that content. So just consume what you need to consume for you. And
mhm,
I know this because my social feed is only full of credible people. I have no BS on my feed because the algorithm, every now and again, it'll try and put some garbage on there and I'll just like hit the X, not me. So it's like everything. If you seek that out, you will find things that make you feel bad. If you've got this death wish of just wanting to feel bad all the time and follow people talking about success, or take ownership of it and just say, that's not serving me. That's not serving, this content is serving me. I've learned about AI in the last 6 months because these incredibly intelligent people that understand AI are on social media. So it can be a force for good, but
mhm,
fundamental flawless leadership is everything comes back to you. Everything comes back to 100% investment in what you can control, and you can control what you consume as much as you can control how you feel. So
mhm,
that's the key here. It's like, don't you curate the environment that you operate in, the people that you associate with. And over time, you will build an environment that's supportive and empowering rather than benchmarking against others.
mhm, mhm. In your work, you distinguish between high performance and deep performance. What's the difference there?
So, high performance is what everyone thinks high performance is. I think it's been hijacked. So, if you look at the NFL, everyone is high performance, but the deep performers win the Super Bowl. So it's a different level of high performance. It's one level up. It's a dynasty. Like Warren Buffett is a deep performer. Ray Dalio, deep performer. Serena Williams, Michael Jordan, all these people are deep performers because high performance tends to be talent and effort orientated, whereas deep performance is focused effort. It's quite different. And when you have focused effort, you create structure, you create simplicity. You're really good at the basics and you're completely invested in what you can control. It's a zero excuse environment. So that's the difference. Like if you really want to be the best of the best or be a dynasty or, you know, become a incredibly wealthy individual, you just got to be highly consistent and stick to the basics and be don't try and chase the next shiny thing. Don't
Mm,
look for a gimmick. Don't be showy. Don't it's it's almost the opposite mind to be a high performer, people think that you've got to be a certain way.
mhm,
That is this high energy extroverted lunatic that's super talented. Whereas deep performance is almost the other. It's deep, consistent, thoughtful work where everyone focuses on the basics. I just did an event yesterday for the Nike leadership team, and they had a coach come in, one of the most successful coaches in college football, Coach Few, and just listening to him, talk about performance. He's a deep performer, and his college is a deep performer. Like 27 years, they've been at the top of the game. And he just says it's focus on people and focus on the basics. And when you can tell the people who are going to make the NBA from college because they're 10 minutes early to practice, they're 10 minutes late, they're practicing their free throws when everyone's gone home. They're just investing in the basics, not just investing in the new stuff.
mhm, mhm. Um, and in your experience working with, different teams, what does it look like when someone is performing well externally but struggling internally?
Yeah, I think it's easy. I think, you know, no matter what happens, if you're not doing well, eventually it manifests in results. And that's again why we have the three moments of leadership. So the results layer is it's like think of it like a thermometer. And if the thermometer is running hot, then someone's unwell.
Mhm,
You know, results aren't really where they need to be for that person, or it used to be at a level and it's no longer there. And that's when you go into the people leadership layer and you just ask, "Hey, are you okay?" And you're asking that from a place of empathy and care. Like you're not doing it because you have to. You're doing it because you're like, "Hey, I think you're an awesome person. There's something going on here that doesn't add up. You feeling okay? I'm here for you. Like, just if there's anything you want to get off your chest." And I had that moment in the Air Force. I was doing really well, and then all of a sudden, I started doing really bad. And what happened between those two moments in time is my uncle was killed in a helicopter accident, and I thought I had processed that, and it was like, "Oh, that happens, it's aviation." But then I met a pastor who said to me, he says, "Oh, no, this you're grieving by failing. Like, you're demonstrating your grief by effectively throwing your performance." And I'm like, "What? It doesn't make any sense." I was only 20, so I'm like, it's a bit high level for me. And he goes, "Look, let's have a week off, spend some time with me." And then after a couple of days, I just had like an emotional breakdown and then rebuilt and I got back on track and I was away. That's leadership moments in action right there. Um, and that's where I got this idea from. I mean, so my new book comes out in June and everything in there is like my life, but I've had to go and pressure test it against research around why it worked for me and how it works for everyone else. And it's quite amazing that if you start thinking this way and operating this way, I wouldn't say life gets easier. Not for me, because I have that high performance dysfunction of always pushing too hard and never being satisfied. But for people that just feel like life's a bit beige, I have seen this in these people. All of a sudden, they just get some wins on the board. Yeah, and when they start getting some wins on the board, they start to feel better. When they feel better, they start to exercise better. They stop eating bad food, and their life kind of just miraculously evolves into a better life.
mhm, mhm. I know I've seen this a lot in my work doing consulting with nonprofits and academic organizations. For you, where do you see organizations getting stuck in repeated patterns?
Well, specifically in academia and non for profit, a lot of non for profit, and I've worked in this field, like
Mhm,
I contracted to these people, the United Nations, aid organizations, is because it's a non for profit, everyone's a good person. And because everyone's a good person, oh, don't get angry at anyone. Don't have any difficult conversations. And the performance tends to get hijacked by niceness, like almost like an artificial harmony rather than like a radical truth. So in non for profits, they spend a lot of time up in the people leadership layer. They're very empathetic. I call them the wandering dreamer. Like they're they're well intentioned, but the intention doesn't often move down into reality.
mhm,
In education, particularly in academia, it's the opposite of what I said before. Show up as as the dumbest person in the room. In academia, you have to show up as the smartest person in the room.
mhm,
That's how you get your job. I'm a professor. I'm a lecturer. I must be the smartest person in the room. And there's massive ego in higher education. So for them, it's the whereas you've got overly nice here, you've got overly ego over here. It's like, hey, just create an environment where you are open for challenge. And I think what happens is in academia, because challenge is so aggressive, because peer review is like, you're smarter than me and you've come up with a new idea. So I have to try and tear you down and make this idea bad. That everyone kind of hides their cards a bit closer to their chest. So there's always ingrained behaviors. And it goes back to, academia is tens of thousands of years old,
mm,
back to Socrates.
mhm.
Yeah, so it's never had this opportunity to think new, to think next generation. And I think, with AI, it's going to be a massive leveler for everybody. When I refer to AI as actual intelligence, not artificial, like it's actual intelligence. And all of a sudden, a lot of these walls that we used to hide behind are starting to crumble. And that's going to be very difficult for a lot of senior people to come to terms with. Y- you know, but there's something you can do about it. You just got to kind of find your inner humility and curiosity, and you'll be okay.
So, again, thinking about more of your personal journey, what yeah, I think you kind of shared some of this in your story earlier, but maybe you have a different moment you wanna reflect on. What was a critical moment for you that changed your trajectory in your life?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Being 5 years old and wanting to be a fighter pilot, but everything else was intentional. So
Mm,
there's I mean, there were surprises that the world threw at me, but you expect them. You know, I lost my ability to fly fighter jets. So what am I going to do? Go and sit in a bar and be miserable, or just get on with it? You know. And I think my grandmother, she passed away last year at the age of 99, and I had this opportunity to just sit down with her for 4 hours and just interview her. And there was this common theme about, and her life was hard. She was, British. She lived during World War II. She's getting bombed. Her fiance was killed. She had a baby. The baby was stolen by a mother. A whole bunch of horrendous stuff that most people would just crumble under. And it's like her philosophy, and I must have picked this up as a kid on the way through was, how do you survive? And she's like, well, you just get on with it. Like you just have got to keep going. There's no choice in the matter. And I think that's a little bit of get it done as well. Like it's just like don't put off a decision. Don't put just take a first little baby step and manage your expectations and just very slowly transform into who you want to be.
yeah, I think sometimes it's easy to wanna, again, hear the secret formula to overcome things or, whatever that is, that framework or all the different ways we can try to guide people through it, but like you said, sometimes the only thing we really can do is just do it.
Yeah. The secret formula is, oh, look, there's no secret formula.
Basically. But yeah. What's one belief you had to unlearn to lead effectively?
I think for me, you know, Well, I had a bit of PTSD after I lived in Afghanistan for too long. And I think for me, it's very much you don't have to leave the armor on all the time. Like running a business is very hard. You're a budding entrepreneur, new entrepreneur, you're living it. It's always hard. It's hard when you have no money. It's hard when your business is now generating a lot of money. It's always hard. There's always problems. They just have extra zeros on the back of them. So I think for me, almost being so even keeled and so neutral that you forget that emotion has a place in life. That you can be happy about stuff and you can be sad about stuff. And I spent a year with a psychologist, kind of just unpacking that a little bit and you know embracing that vulnerability a little bit more. I think, and I will always default back to the body armor as opposed to the vulnerability. So I've got to constantly check in, make sure I spend time with my family, make sure I open myself up a little bit. But it's for me, that's a job. It's not something that comes easy. I have to bring intention to being that version of myself.
Mhm, mhm. I love that, and I think that actually just beautifully transitions into my signature resolution question. So when you think about the way that you've navigated pressure, performance, and people in your life, what's one piece of advice you like to leave with the audience for anyone sort of just in a moment of struggle?
I'm going to steal Will Smith's perspective on here because as conflicted as that gentleman is, he said something that resonated with me. And he said he spent all of his life fighting to climb up the cliff. And then when he got to the top of the cliff, he looked down, it was just an abyss. So success in itself doesn't make you feel happy. Getting stuff doesn't make you feel happy. I have met incredibly happy, fulfilled human beings that can barely afford to live and incredibly unhappy, miserable people that have billions of dollars in the bank. So invest in the journey. And if you want to achieve something, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be the faux fame of social media, and get yourself out of that environment because when you get to the top, and I've been there as well, the top is just the bottom of the next ladder. Like it never ends. So enjoy the journey.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. You did mention you have a new book coming out. Can you let the audience know about that? What's next for you and where people can follow your work?
Yeah, Flawless Leadership will be coming out later this year. It's a little bit of a manual for people that feel like they're just kind of falling short of their expectations or maybe the expectations of others. My website's called Call Me Boo. My company's called Afterburner. But if you just type my name in Boucousis, you'll find me. I'm like the only one out there. So uh, have a unique name, and please do just reach out. I'm always happy to help, and everyone that reaches out, I get to learn from as well. We're a complex fabric of humanity, so don't feel like you can't reach out and say hi, ask a question.
Yeah. And I learned so much from you today. So, again, thank you just for your time and for talking with the audience. And we hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, Doc. Appreciate it.
If this conversation gave you something to reflect on, consider taking a moment to rate and subscribe. It helps more people find their way into these conversations. And if you'd like to bring a conversation like this into your organization or community, you can submit a speaking request. And if you prefer to start on your own, visit the Resolution Library for a collection of digital resources designed to help you put this into practice one step at a time. Access to our community, speaking requests, and online resources can be found at our website, linked in the show notes. Until next time, keep building in the quiet because that's what will carry you forward.